It's Wednesday, and that means it's time for another Professor Nance lesson. This week, we're talking about personal budgets. Let's go. Okay, so the thing that you want to know is that this course is designed where each lesson builds upon each other. And so if you haven't done lesson 3 yet, it may be helpful to go and review that lesson before you look at this one, but it's totally fine if you haven't. This lesson also does stand on its own. So we're going to start on my website, professornance.com. Yes, it is still under construction, undergoing a makeover, but I have added a task menu that has all of our different TikTok class things separated out. So the syllabus is on here, the income statement, and today we're going to be looking at the budget. And it's going to bring you to this page that looks similar to the personal income statement, where you're going to be able to download your copy of this template that we're going to go through today. So you're going to make a copy. It's going to force you to make a copy. And then when you come in here, some of this is going to look familiar, but it's also going to look a little bit different. So the thing that's going to look familiar is that you still have a revenue tab. You still have an expense tab. This time I did leave in some placeholders, and I'm going to show you why in a minute. But the thing that is new here is that we have this 2025 budget and actuals spreadsheet. And basically what this does is it allows us to start with our budget that we calculated last week. And I'll show you what that looks like. We can annualize that budget. And then it's going to give you we're going to be able to look at our actuals for each individual month for the whole year of 2025. Okay, so just a really quick review. Last week we talked about our personal income statement, and we looked at this from the perspective of 1 month. I had changed this to March, but we looked at it for January. So last week you were tasked with adding all of your January expenses and revenues to these various tabs and making sure to put the category there. And then it was coming over here on your total actuals for January. And those numbers were then used to calculate a budget for February. All right, so this is kind of now you're taking this from last week and going to be starting with that here on this budget. And so some key things to remember is that a budget is a plan. It's not like in stone. It changes, and hopefully you have the flexibility to be able to adjust to those changes. And an example of that is like if you have a car issue, you have to get your car fixed. That's not typically going to be in your budget unless it's preventative, like an oil change is something that you may include in your budget. But having to get new wheels on your new tires on your car, or having to do extra things like that is typically not going to be included in your budget, but that's okay because hopefully we're saving and we're planning for that in other ways. All right, so really quickly, just an overview. Let's go back to our revenue sheet. So last time we talked about the importance of, and I should change this, the importance of entering an amount, the status, and the date was optional. For this sheet, the date is required because our budget and actual spreadsheet is being built based on the status and the date. So for example, this person has $250 of ongoing money coming in January, and then $250 of a one-time in February. And so when we go over here, we can see ongoing January $250, one-time receipt February $250. So this is not only pulling it over and putting it in the right place, but it's also putting it in the right column. And that's what the formulas that are already there are doing for you. So all you have to do is just remember to make sure that you put this information, these required fields in. You're going to do exactly what you've been doing last month. If you did your personal income statement, even if you didn't do your personal income statement, then you definitely want to do this one. You're just going to keep dropping in your expenses. All of your January money and expenses should already be here because January has passed and there's no undoing or redoing anything that happened that month. But you can then start to add your February things as they're happening. Again, my recommendation is to use your transactions report from your bank account or your credit card report and literally copy and paste them in here, and then make sure you categorize them with as far as their status. And that's an easier way to be able to do this and really pay attention to what you're spending. Before you put in your expenses, you want to build out your budget. This, you can, like I said, use this exactly like what you had from last week, so you can copy it over here, verbatim, or you can take some time to really think through this. So the rule of thumb for a budget is that it should be a 50, 30, 20 rule. 50% of the expenses, so we're not talking about revenue, of the expenses of the money that you spend should be spent on needs. And so when you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, then you think of housing, you think of utilities, you think of groceries. That could also include some transportation like car payments and things like that, but it's all up to you and how you define it. And so 50% of the money that you bring in should be going towards that. So for the purposes of this demonstration, 50% is going to the house. That's probably too much because you still need room for utilities and food. But what that's doing is then annualizing that amount. So we have the annual budget here as well. And that's just going to allow you to be able to look at it on an annual basis later. If that's too much for you, you can also hide that column. Like, you don't have to look at that. And you can hide any of these columns if you don't want to look at them. Okay, so then you're just going to kind of go down the line and fill in these numbers. So I'm just going to make that 6,000. And then one time, I'm going to leave that blank for right now because most people, you wouldn't necessarily budget for that, but you do want to capture if you have actuals that are like one-time receipts. And then down here, you're looking at your rent. I'm gonna change that to 2,300, not 23,000. Utilities, we're gonna say, for me, utilities would include electricity, gas, water, cell phone, potentially internet. It's up to you how you want to categorize things. And then you have your groceries and food, entertainment, that can vary each month. Your transportation, so that's going to be your car payment, maybe some car insurance as well would go there. Debt payments for me is usually like credit card bills, student loan payments, things like that. And so and I'm making up numbers at this point. All right, we're going to put a couple hundred in savings. We're going to donate a couple hundred. And then we have childcare of $750. All right, I'm going to show you how to rename these placeholders, but I did want to put them here because people had other things that were outside of the list that I had provided. Thanks. Shout out to my live people for that recommendation. All right. And so here we have money left over, which is where you want to land. And we're just using this as a guide going forward. Okay. And so as we come over here and we change different things, it's not going to necessarily flag it for us that these amounts are wrong or anything like that, but it's just good for us to kind of keep up with and know oh, the actual amount was this. And so you can see that they're changing here based on the date, based on the classification. Okay, so this is yours to build out. The biggest thing to remember, the lesson here is the 50, 30, 20% rule. So 50% needs, 30% wants, and then 20% should be savings. So ideally this number is 20% of whatever you're bringing in each month. So equal 0.2 times $6,000. So that would be $1,200 going to savings. All right. So for the purpose of this example, because these numbers are not real number, I'm just going to make that back to 200. I don't want to show us having a negative down here. So really quickly, before we get out of here, I want to show you how to change those placeholders. So you can see some of them have been actually used here. So anytime you want to change your list, you're just going to click into one, scroll down to the bottom, hit this pencil. And then let's say for this first placeholder, we want to change it to wellness. So placeholder 1, we replaced it with wellness. And then you have to reselect it because placeholder 1 is no longer in the list. And so the biggest thing is that you have to make sure and come over here and change it as well. And then you'll see on the wellness line that one date that we had is now showing up. So we did it right. All right, so that's how you change it. This is yours. Once again, we will go live. We'll play around in here. I'll address questions. It's probably going to be Sunday night because I'm traveling on Monday. But until then, have fun. All right. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. Thanks for investing in yourself. So for your participation prompt this week, my question is, what is the hardest category on this budget for you to stick to? I already know my answer, and if you've been watching my videos, you know my answer too, but I'd like to hear from you. What's the hardest category for you?